Once again, Christian greetings to all our valued listeners and viewers throughout the whole world, more particularly to all Shepherd's Rod believers in the United States of America. Special greetings to our brethren in Colorado, our brethren in Georgia, in Fiji Island, Mexico, Spain, in Africa, to the United Kingdom, and also to our brethren in Australia, and to the rest of the 144,000 living saints scattered abroad. Greetings. May the good Lord bless you, brothers and sisters. This is our episode number 12, the subject, the 42 months prophecy. And at this time, we will focus our whole attention on Revelation 11, verse 2, the last verse that pertains to the subject on Revelation chapter 10. Now, since the particular object in view on the subject on Revelation chapter 10 is concerning the book of Daniel, therefore, Revelation 11 verse 2 must be the climactic point of the book of Daniel, or in other words, at the fulfillment of Revelation 11 verse 2, the book of Daniel is completely understood or completely opened. And to repeat again, concerning the book of Daniel, the particular object in view, if it pertains to the occurrence on earth, it is concerning the exceeding great horn, the thing by which Daniel do not understand, according to tract number 3, page 34. The work of the exceeding great horn was therefore what he did not understand. So whatever the explanation given by the angel when it pertains to the occurrence on the earth, it is concerning the work of the exceeding great horn, because that is the only thing by which Daniel do not understand as far as the earthly occurrences is thus concerned. Now, secondly, of all the books in the Old Testament, the book of Daniel is especially mentioned by Jesus Christ in Matthew 24, verse 15. And Jesus Christ attached a divine command as stated by the Shepherd's Rod, tract number 12, on page 81, saying that these three links of truth, the polluting of the sanctuary, the taking away of the daily, and the placing of the abomination in the prophetic chain of events, bring us several centuries into the Christian era, is conclusively confirmed by Christ referring to them as in the future from the time he uttered the command. So Matthew 24, verse 15 and 16, it is a command. There is a divine command in that reading. And the divine command first pointing to the absolute importance to understand the book of Daniel, saying, whoso readeth, let him understand. 100% the reason why God sealed the book of Daniel, it's so because the book of Daniel is not intended to the people living prior to the time of the end. So let us read again in 2 TG number 7, page 3. Daniel was told to shut and seal the book, even to the time of the end. The book, therefore, was not for the understanding of the people before the time of the end. 2 TG 7, page 3. So there is no reason for God to attach the divine command to understand the book of Daniel to the people living prior to the time of the end, because there is no possibility to understand the book, seeing that God himself sealed the book. So those people living prior to the time of the end will not be held accountable whatever the truth contained in the book of Daniel, for there is no possibility that they could understand the book. Logically, such divine command must be applied only to the generation by which the book of Daniel was gradually opened, of course, by Christ himself. Now, I would like to read tract number 3 on page 25. It says, from this juxtaposition of Daniel 8 verse 11 and 12, and Daniel 11 verse 31, the reader will observe that both scriptures are speaking of the same power, and Christ predicting the signs of the end of the world as he looked forward along the stream of time declared, when he, his followers, who were to be living at the time that this horned power was at work against God, at work against his truth, and at work against his people, therefore shall see the abomination of desolation, spoken of by Daniel the prophet, stand in the holy place. Whoso readeth, let him understand. Then let them which be in Judea flee into the mountains. Matthew 24 verse 15 and 16. These clear words of Christ himself place the work of this power in the future from his time. At this time, I would like to prove to you that the horn power mentioned here is the predicted president of the United States of America. Therefore, our study must be closely connected to the presidential election of the United States of America. Meaning, at the time that this president sit in office, that is the time that this horn power was at work against God, against his truth, and against his people. So, there's the reason why we need to study closely this very important prophetic event, brothers and sisters. Although, in reality, this time I'm not totally feeling well, but I saw only the necessity of sharing this message. And since this coming presidential election in the United States of America is one of the remarkable one ever recorded in the Bible and its pure prophecy in the Shepherd's Rod publications, it would be better for us to completely follow the injunction given in fundamental in Christian education. Let us read again on page 477 that it says we have no battle in this political world, and that is why I would like to read that admonition in fundamental Christian education. Let me see if I could find that. Okay. Now I would like to read and those statements saying that you will be partakers. It says, I call upon my brethren. So ponder deeply this admonition, and I do fully believe that it is even more particularly applied, that statement, in this presidential election of the United States of America. Because as I've stated, as far as the Bible, the prophecies does concern, it is the last and the final presidential election of the United States of America. And it says, I call upon my brethren, upon my fellow Shepherd's Rod believers, who are appointed to educate, to change their course of action. It is a mistake for you to link your interests with any political party, with any, either Democrats or Republican, to cast your vote with them or for them. Those who stand as educators, as ministers, as laborers together with God in any line, have no battles to fight in the political world. Our citizenship is in heaven. The Lord calls upon them to stand as separate and peculiar people. Then, let us read the statement. So it says, let's read the statement. So, the statement saying, brothers and sisters, the people of God are not to vote. The people of God are not to vote to place such men in office. For when they do this, they are partakers with them of the sins which they commit while in office. So, I quoted that passage because the oncoming presidential election in the United States of America is getting nearer and nearer. And that is the reason why the message is directed to the United States of America. We know that there are two very important events recorded in the book of Daniel, and that is Daniel 11 verse 45 and Daniel 12 verse 1. That two important events we need to be very vigilant and study closely. When Jesus Christ gave such admonition, not only an admonition, but a divine command according to tract number 12, page 81, to understand the book of Daniel, for sure, it is pertaining to the entire book of Daniel. But first of all, it is even more particularly directing to that horn power, according to tract number 3, page 25. And undoubtedly, the followers of Jesus Christ in that reading in tract number 3, page 25, they are those who follow the Lamb whithersoever he goeth. And that is the 144,000 living saints. Now, I would like to read first here in the old symbolic code, 2 symbolic code number 1, page 8. Let's read this statement. It says, 2 symbolic code number 1, page 8. It says, the above explains that the two-horned beast is the one to whom the number 666 belongs, and that this beast of Revelation 13, verse 11 to 18, in the King of the North of Daniel 11, verse 45, are the same power, the same with the statement in tract number 3, page 25, right? The same power, Daniel 11, 31, and Daniel 8, verse 11 and 12. Therefore, the nation represented by this particular beast and the King of the North, or the man who is to be the head king of that nation, in the time when this image beast, the two-horn, enforces the worship of his image, whose image is nothing less than the thing he made, or to make a likeness of the religio-political system of the beast before him, the leopard-like of Revelation 13, verse 1 to 10. That is a likeness of the papal system in the period before the leopard-like beast received his deadly wound. And then it says, as the fulfillment of this prophecy is yet future, we cannot now tell who will then be the head king of the North of this prophetic nation, modern Babylon, that is symbolized by the two-horned beast. 2 symbolic code number 1, page 8. And we will gradually explain to you that future in the days of Bitihotep is now being fulfilled this very year. That whoever who will become the President of the United States of America this November 3, 2020, after that presidential election, he must be the man predicted in the Bible. And how do we know this? By studying the book of Daniel. Because it is only in the book of Daniel, together with the book of Revelation, as interpreted by the shepherd's rod, according to Revelation 11, verse 1, that we could ascertain clearly who will be the head of that prophetic nation, United States of America. And after that presidential election of the United States of America, there will be great changes that will happen. Now, let us go back again to our subject, because that portion, we will discuss that on the subject, the image of the beast. Now, going back again to our subject, Revelation chapter 10 and verse 2 being the last verse that is included in the subject of Revelation chapter 10, then we need to study closely Revelation 11 verse 2. Now, Revelation 11 verse 2 is pointing to the great multitude, the second fruits of the living saints, or the commencement of the proclamation of the message to all nations, because the focal point on Revelation chapter 10 is only to many nations. Now let us follow the injunction or admonition given by the shepherd's rod in answerer number 3 on page 41, saying, let us remember always to observe the inviolable rule that an interpretation of one inspired statement must harmonize with all other related statements. So, the statement or that passage saying all related statements. Therefore, when we study Revelation 11 verse 2, since it is pointing to the great multitude, which no man could number, Revelation 7 verse 9, then we need to harmonize all related statements that pertains to the great multitude in order to get the full beam of light. Now, so let us read again tract number 5. Here on tract number 5, page 105, it says, the trumpet symbolism has now brought us up to the time of the ingathering of the first fruits, the 144,000. First fruits predicate second fruits, for it is necessarily true that there can be no first where there is no second. Wherefore, just as there is a prophetic commission for the ingathering of the first fruits from many nations, so there must be one for the ingathering of the second fruits from all nations. So it says here, tract number 5, page 105, there being, moreover, an important event and a message at the commencement of the ingathering of the first fruits from many nations since 1844. So must there be an important event and a message signalizing the commencement of the ingathering of the second fruits, the great multitude from all nations. So let us carefully elaborate this paragraph. Now, the trumpet mentioned here is the sixth trumpet. So during the sixth trumpet, there are two ingathering. The ingathering of the first fruits, 144,000, and the ingathering of the second fruits, the great multitude. So Revelation 7 verse 9. Both of them are to be fulfilled during the sixth trumpet. So let us distinctly separate the ingathering of the first fruits, the 144,000, and the ingathering of the second fruits, the great multitude. Now, concerning the ingathering of the 144,000 living saints, I would like to read again. 2TG 44, page 37. Who gathers the first fruit? If the first fruits gather the second fruits, let us find our answer by reading Revelation 14, verse 14 to 19. I will no longer read Revelation 14. Then it says, here we are again told that there are two reapings, one by the Son of Man and another by an angel. The reaping by the Son of Man precedes the reaping by the angel. The Son of Man, therefore, gathers the first fruits. So, it is the Son of Man that gather the first fruits. So that is very plain. Or, it is Jesus Christ. So, the question, who will gather the first fruits? The definite answer is that it is Jesus Christ. He is the one to gather the first fruits. And the second question must be, when? When does the gathering of the first fruits begins? So, that is the second question. When? When does the gathering or the ingathering of the first fruits begins? And the third one must be, where? Where does the first fruits, the 144,000 living saints, will be gathered? So, those three questions is very important to have a certain positive answer. And the statement here in tract number 5, 105, saying, wherefore, just as there is a prophetic commission for the ingathering of the first fruits from many nations, so there must be one for the ingathering of the second fruits from all nations. Unto whom such prophetic commission? So that statement, prophetic commission, can be easily understood that they are not the one who will gather the 144,000, because we have already an absolute answer that it is Jesus Christ who will gather the 144,000. So the statement, prophetic commission, can be easily understood that unto them was committed entrusted or bestowed by Jesus Christ the complete information concerning the ingathering of the 144,000 living saints. Although it is Jesus Christ who will gather the 144,000 living saints, but there must be a group of people by which such divine commission, divine prophetic commission was entrusted unto them. We know that it was first bestowed by God, or such divine commission was given to the Seventh-day Adventist Church, but they failed because of their unbelief or because of their unfaithfulness. All of us knew that the message that was entrusted by God to the Seventh-day Adventist Church is the three angels' messages. According to Volume 9, page 19, it says, Volume 9, page 19, in a spatial sense, Seventh-day Adventists had been set in the world as watchmen and light-bearers. To them has been entrusted the last warning for a perishing world. On them is shining wonderful light from the Word of God. They have been given a work of the most solemn import, the proclamation of the first, second, and third angels' messages. There is no other work of so great importance. They are to allow nothing else to absorb their attention. Volume 9, page 19. But according to Testimonies to Ministers, page 86, it says the conviction is gaining ground that the Seventh-day Adventist Church is sounding the trumpet, uncertain sound. So, uncertain sound. Testimonies to Ministers, page 86. And according to Volume 6, on page 60, it says, we are in danger of giving the third angel's message in so indefinite a manner that it does not impress the people. So many other interests are brought in that the very message which would be proclaimed with power becomes tame and voiceless. Volume 6, page 60. And according to the Shepherd's Rod and Answerer number 1 on page 83, saying, moreover, the abominations in the church have not only kept back the loud cry, but have also even silenced the fainter cry, which precedes it. Indeed, the angel of the church of the Laodiceans, being unfit even to finish the proclamation of the message in its fainter cry, must be altogether unfit to proclaim it in the loud cry. Obviously, if he does not now quickly repent and accept the additional message, which is to begin the loud cry, then not only will he not help proclaim it, but he will even be spewed out. Answerer number 1, page 83. So, we always emphasize that without the Shepherd's Rod message, it utters the impossibility that the Seventh-day Adventist Church could be able to reach her goal in 1 TG 42, page 4. The conclusion is that without this additional message, the church will never reach her goal, or without the Shepherd's Rod publications, because the Bible is very plain in Revelation 11, verse 1, and there was given me a reed like unto a rod, pointing directly to the Shepherd's Rod message. And I would like to go back again to the historical event that when God rejected Saul, he commanded the prophet Samuel to go to the house of Jesse, and one among his sons is chosen by God. And historically, before David had been anointed by Samuel, his 7 brothers had been passed one by one, by which that event are typological. And whether you believe it or not, the movement that had been raised from 1930 to 1955 must be our father, antitypical JC. And from that movement came out 8 different organizations, by which the youngest is David. Now, although in the type, in the Old Testament, nobody claimed that they were David, because that is very inconsistent. But each of them have a desire that Samuel would anoint them, but God does not choose one among them, only David, the youngest. Now, unlike at this time, every Davidian claimed that they were antitypical David. Every Davidian claimed that they were the church in the New Testament succession. And as a matter of fact, that is the reason why they were quarreling, bickering each other, hostile against each other's faith, because of their desire to lift up themselves, that they were the true movement, brothers and sisters. And that is what's happening today among the media. But in this study, we can easily discern and easily recognize that the one that had been given by the shepherd's rod message must be that movement by which they had been able to know the measurement of the temple, the measurement of the altar, and the measurement of the worshippers. Everyone could claim. There is no difficulty to claim, but there will be a hard time to prove. So this verse in Revelation 11, verse 1, is the absolute answer to recognize the church in the New Testament succession. So to repeat again, this statement in tract number 5, 105, saying, I would like to, wherefore, just as there is a prophetic commission for the ingathering of the first fruits from many nations. First, the word commission undoubtedly is addressed to God's church, to His movement. And such divine prophetic commission must be pointing to Revelation 11 verse 1. And let us read again the divine prophetic commission. Revelation 11 verse 1. And there was given me a reed like unto a rod, and the angel stood, saying, Rise, and measure the temple of God, and the altar, and them that worship therein. So that is the divine prophetic commission that God bestowed unto him, the rod, the shepherd's rod. To have the shepherd's rod publications is not the absolute proof that we have the shepherd's rod message. The same with the situation in the Seventh-day Adventist Church. As a matter of fact, there is no other group of people by which they have the complete publications of Sister White except the Seventh-day Adventist Church. But the question is that, is it an absolute proof that they are the people by which in Revelation 14:12, here are the patience of the saints who keep the commandments of God and have the faith of Jesus, by which according to Revelation 19, page 10, the faith of Jesus is the spirit of prophecy. The argument used by B.T. Hotep in tract number 6, page 46, it says, tract number 6, page 46, not long ago, a certain minister said, my conception of the spirit of prophecy is different from yours. The prophecies in the Bible are my spirit of prophecy. Now, so he must say, if the spirit of prophecy were not ever active, but if the spirit of prophecy begins and ends with the Bible, then all Christians have the spirit of prophecy. If this is so, though, why does the Revelation make a distinction between the Christians who have the spirit of prophecy and those who do not? The minister's idea is to say the least, illogical, for it puts Revelation 12:17 and 19:10 in the realm of the meaningless. So the first argument used by B.T. Hotep says that if the spirit of prophecy is the Bible, then all Christians must have the spirit of prophecy because all Christians, they have the Bible. Now, if the spirit of prophecy is the writings of Ellen G. White, or in other words, to have the spirit of prophecy is to have the writings of Ellen G. White, then it must be the Seventh-day Adventist Church, because they are the very people by which they have the complete publications of Sister White in their hands. So, logically, to have the books is not an evidence that we have the spirit of prophecy. I remember the statement in 2TG. Let's read. It says, 2TG 41, page 21. It says here, a disciple is one who follows Christ on and on in divinely revealed truth, which he accepts not because others do or do not, but because the Father which is in heaven has through his Spirit personally convinced him of it. Matthew 16 verse 17. Because independent of what others do or say, he is personally persuaded by the Spirit. And the testimony is his living word passed on by his chosen and Spirit-filled messengers, the spirit of prophecy at work. Revelation 19 verse 10. Hence, to bind up the testimony among his disciples is to confirm that the spirit of prophecy among them and them only. And to seal the law among them is to have the law authorized and fortified by truth, to have them see the necessity of keeping it, and to have them calmly say. So here in 2TG 41, page 21, it says, it is the testimony of God's living word. What does it mean by living word? Meaning, progressive. And there is no other who will pass, who have an absolute authority to pass that living word from one messenger to another messenger is the Spirit of Christ, which is the Spirit of truth, who transmitted the mysteries of inspiration. Here in answerer number 5, page 55. And since none but the Spirit of truth, that Spirit of truth, that is the Spirit of Jesus Christ, and since none but the Spirit of truth, who transmitted the mysteries of inspiration. It is the Spirit of truth, which is the Spirit of Christ, that transmitted the mysteries of inspiration. For example, in tract number 6, on page 34, it says, Isaiah's vision, tract number 6, page 34. It says, Isaiah's vision perfectly corroborates the aforequoted testimony. Both prophets could not possibly, except by the same Spirit, lay open the same condition with such absolute fidelity to fact. Thus, by Scripture and by logic, we are carried to the peak of evidence and of conviction that Mrs. White was inspired by the same Spirit as was Isaiah. So, the Spirit that inspired Isaiah was transmitted to Ellen G. White, and that is called the same Spirit of inspiration. So here in tract number 6, page 46 and 47. Tract number 6, 46 and 47. Throughout these pages, the spirit of prophecy has, by the prophetic word, proved itself invulnerable to attack. It has vindicated itself not as a voice beginning with Moses and ending before John the Baptist, but as the ever-living testimony beginning with creation and continuing with the patriarchs Enoch, Noah, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, then with the prophets, next with the apostles, and finally with the messengers of the Lord in our own day and on. It says, rising higher and higher with its encounter, as the reader can readily see. It will rise still higher when it is next considered that reflections cast upon one's character do not affect the truth. So that is very plain, transmitted from one person to another. The same with the statement in 2TG number 45 on page 8 saying, it says, I would like to read, for this very reason, the laying on of hands is the biblical method of transmitting the Spirit of God from one person to another. But in the New Testament, it is only the hands of Jesus that can transmit His own Spirit from one person to another person. So to repeat again, for sure, Revelation 11 verse 1 must be the one by which the shepherd's rod that was given by God to Bethhotep is transmitted to him. And the testimony says, and there was given me a reed like unto a rod. So this message, the shepherd's rod message, had been passed into the hands of this messenger, and he must be antitypical Joshua, the second section of the Exodus movement. And I know that the same with all the Christians, everybody claim. But if we want to be very certain, brothers and sisters, the concrete evidence by which that man, the shepherd's rod message, had been given by God unto him, because the shepherd's rod is called the rod of God in Exodus 4 verse 20 and 21. And since it is the rod of God, then it is God himself who will appoint it. And I remember in tract number 6 on page 80 saying, "Therefore, brethren, settle it once and forever, that with the Lord's help you will no longer be carried away by winds of doctrine that are created and driven by the spirit of error, not by the spirit of truth, but that you will always look for and stand by the inspired word of God, the testimony of Jesus delivered to you by the spirit of prophecy." Revelation 12:17 and 19:10. "That you will hear the rod, and who hath appointed it?" Who hath appointed it? It is God. It is God who appointed. And the spirit of prophecy, that is the spirit of Christ in the prophet. And here in the old symbolic code, it says 5 symbolic code 1 to 5 page 6. 5 symbolic code 1 to 5 page 6. In the last book of the Bible, chapter 12 verse 17, we find that the devil will be especially wroth with those who have the testimony of Jesus Christ, which the author of the book tells us is the spirit of prophecy. Revelation 19 verse 10. And the Apostle Peter makes it clear that the testimony of Jesus and the spirit of prophecy are the spirit of Christ in the prophets who testified beforehand. 1 Peter chapter 1 verse 11. Thus it was in the apostles' time, thus it must be now. Hence the testimonies come from the spirit of him, that is the spirit of Christ, who spake as no man ever spake. 5 symbolic code 1 to 5 page 6. So to have the spirit of prophecy is not simply to have the books. Here in timely greetings, I would like to read to you that to have the spirit of prophecy, accordingly, it says in 2 TG 14:17, the testimony of Jesus Christ, inspiration explains, is the spirit of prophecy. Revelation 19 verse 10. To have the spirit of prophecy is to have the spirit of Christ. It says to have the spirit of prophecy is to have the spirit who uttered the prophecies and who only can interpret them, for no prophecy of the scripture is of any private interpretation. It says, nor without the inspiration of the same spirit. So very plain in 2 TG 14:17. So to have the spirit of prophecy is to have the spirit of Christ. And of course, it is connected to the subject in the Assyrian Confederacy, Emmanuel, meaning God is with us. Now, let us go back again to our reading. To repeat again, brothers and sisters, this divine command to measure the temple of God, to measure the altar and the worshiper, is the strongest proof, the concrete evidence that whoever been able to know the measurement of the temple, the measurement of the altar, the measurement of the worshipers, he must be the only one by which God appointed him to have the rod of God. All others are rod of men. For example, in the Christian world, all denominations, they have the Bible. But is it the absolute proof that they have the lamp? Because it says, the word is a light unto my path. Psalms 119:105. In Proverbs 6:23, that is pointing to the commandments. And how could it be that they have the lamp while they were Sunday keepers? So to have the Bible is not a proof at all. To have the all the writings of Sister White is not a proof that they are the people by which the spirit of prophecy had been entrusted by God unto them. But it is the message within that book. It is the message within that book, the Bible. It is the message within that book, the spirit of prophecy. It is the message within that book, the Shepherd's Rod publications. So what is the very message within the Shepherd's Rod publications? To have the incontestable fact, impregnable evidence, to build concretely that according to Apostle Paul in 1 Corinthians chapter 1, I would like to read that verse. It says in verse 6, 1 Corinthians chapter 1 verse 6, even as the testimony of Christ was confirmed in you. So the testimony of Jesus Christ is confirmed. The same with 2 TJ 41, page 21, because they have the living word. What does it mean by living word? It is not stagnant. It is progressive, living word. The same with the statement in Answerer number 4 on page 38 and 39. It says, accordingly, Answerer number 4, page 38 and 39, accordingly, with inspiration and progressive revelation, present truth, go the case of the kingdom. Accordingly, with inspiration and progressive revelation, present truth, go the case. Progressive revelation. Now, let us go back to Revelation 11 verse 1 and tell me if there is any Davidian group that could be able to explain Revelation 11 verse 1 more than what we explain using the Shepherd's Rod publications. Now, let us read again. Tract number 5 on page 109. It says, tract number 5, 109. The investigative judgment of the dead consequently takes place in the heavenly temple only, whereas the investigative judgment of the living takes place in the heavenly as well as in the earthly temple. While the records are being made up for the books in the heavenly, the people are being investigated for the separation in the earthly. Matthew 22 verse 11 to 13. See Malachi 3 verse 1 to 3. And as the measuring is figurative of the same work, then it leads to the conclusion that the temple, the altar, and them that worship therein must figuratively represent the three classes to be judged. The temple and the altar, inanimate objects, must characterize two classes of inanimate saints, the two classes of dead saints. An altar, moreover, obviously cannot be installed in a temple before the temple is built. And furthermore, in size, it is comparatively much smaller than a temple. Naturally then, it must be symbolized a class of saints, which not only comes after those who are characterized by the temple, but which also is proportionately much smaller. Thus the temple, the first and the largest object, must represent the first and largest body of righteous dead, those from Adam's time to the beginning of the judgment in 1844. While the altar, a special and smaller object, must represent a special and smaller body of righteous dead, the righteous who die from 1844 on and who are to come up in the special resurrection of Daniel 12 verse 2, early writings, page 285. Those who worship therein being the living saints who are to be measured, they can only be the 144,000, those whom the denominations was since 1844 to gather in for translation. Now, let us ponder deeply these 4 paragraphs from tract number 5, 109 and 110. First, the Shepherd's Rod says that while the records are being made up, it says, for the books in heaven, in the heavenly. When it pertains to the bookwork, it takes place only in heaven, according to in this reading, as well as in White House Recruiter, page 20. But it cannot be construed that there is no bookwork transaction in the congregation among the living, because that is the first aspect of the judgment, bookwork. According to Answerer number 5, page 30, the first aspect of the judgment is bookwork. It does not disturb either the dead in the graves or the living in the church, for it takes place in heaven. Now, what is the particular object in view of the vision of Daniel? Heavenly sanctuary, not earthly. The particular object in view in the vision of Daniel, it points out to the heavenly, not the earthly. What is the main subject on Revelation chapter 10? It is the book of Daniel. It is the book of Daniel. Therefore, it points out to the proceedings in the heavenly sanctuary. Brothers and sisters. Now, let us try to, because the more we studied it again and again, the more it will be more clearer and clearer. And we will be familiarized with all the aspects pertaining to Revelation chapter 10. We already explained several times that Revelation chapter 10 is a part of the sixth trumpet. It is a part of the sixth trumpet. The sixth trumpet begins on Revelation 9:14, according to tract number 5, page 79. But the sixth trumpet is divided into three divisions. The sixth trumpet recorded on chapter 9, the sixth trumpet recorded on chapter 10, and the sixth trumpet recorded on chapter 11. Now, I would like to use a little board. So, sixth trumpet, the sixth trumpet. So, it is divided into three. The sixth trumpet on Revelation 9, verse 14 to 21, and Revelation 10, verse 1 to 11, and chapter 11, verse 1 and 2, and then Revelation 11, verse 3 to verse 14. So, these are the three divisions of the sixth trumpet. And it is not chronological order. Now, since the statement, I would like to read again. Since the statement in 2TG, number 14, page 15, it says, chapters 10 and 11 consequently sandwiched in chapter 8 and 9. So, it says, chapters 10 and 11 are consequently sandwiched between chapter 8 and chapter 9. That is very plain. Now, it's easy now to understand by dividing the sixth trumpet into three divisions. Now, Revelation 8:13, then we have Revelation 9, verse 1. So, what had been sandwiched here? Only Revelation 10, verse 1 to 11, and Revelation 11, verse 1 and 2. Sandwich. This division is sandwiched between Revelation 8:13 and Revelation 9, verse 1. Right? Because we are talking about Revelation, the sixth trumpet divided into three divisions. So, we focus our attention to this first event, by which Revelation 10, verse 1 to 11, and Revelation 11, verse 1 and 2 is sandwiched between Revelation 8:13 and Revelation 9, verse 1. And let us see what part Revelation 11 from verse 3 to verse 14, what part by which it had been sandwiched. Brothers and sisters, of course it is Revelation chapter 8, but is it chapter 13? Verse 13 rather? Or is it verse 1, the half-hour silence? So we will find out what portion on Revelation 8 by which Revelation 11, this division, Revelation 11, verse 3 to 14, had been sandwiched. And what part on Revelation chapter 9. But let us focus first that Revelation 10, verse 1 to 11, including Revelation 11, verse 1 and 2, is sandwiched between Revelation 8:13 and Revelation 9, verse 1. According to 2TG 14 on page 15. So let us go back to our subject. So Revelation 11, verse 1. So according to tract number 5, saying that there are three classes to be judged, and that is the temple, the altar, and the worshippers. And accordingly, on verse 2, the great multitude, which no man could number, in Revelation 7, verse 9, they were no longer to be measured, meaning investigated, or pass the investigative judgment. there are only three classes to pass the investigative judgment: the temple, the altar, and the worshiper. What investigative judgment? And we explained that several times, that such investigative judgment by which the great multitude will no longer pass such investigation is only in the holy place, which is the blotting out of names. So the cleansing of the sanctuary is the blotting out of names. And it is divided into three periods: the period of the temple, the period of the altar, and the period of the worshipers. So the divine command, measure the temple, the altar, and the worshipers, can be easily understood, brothers and sisters, to have complete understanding concerning the proceedings of the temple, the proceedings of the altar, and the proceedings of the worshippers, by which the particular object in view is pointing to the worshippers, the living saints, the saints that will no longer to taste death, the many nations mentioned in Revelation 10 verse 11. Now, according to the shepherd's rod in 2TG number 14, page 16, let us read again the statement. 2TG 14:16. The subject of chapter 10 ends with the second verse of chapter 11, the verse which brings us to the time of the measuring, numbering of the people, which obviously is the numbering of the 144,000. Chapter 7 verse 3 to 8. For they are the only numbered company of people in the thread of prophecy. Thus it is that chapter 10, including verses 1 and 2 from chapter 11, begins at the time of the end and ends with the numbering of the 144,000. So, when does the time of the end in Revelation chapter 10 ended? It says, and ends with the numbering of the 144,000. What does it mean by numbering of the 144,000? But for sure, the time of the end ended with the numbering of the 144,000. What is the time of the end? The time of the end is a period of time just before the end of the world. 3 Symbolic Code, 8 to 10, page 8. We need to harmonize all other subjects that pertains to Revelation chapter 10. Now, I would like to repeat again. In tract number 5, page 100, tract number 5, page 100, it says, events to take place just before the seventh angel begins to sound. What is that seventh angel? In Revelation 10, verse 5, 6, and 7. That is the seventh trumpet. We read several times that according to Consecrated Way to Christian Perfection, page 112, that when Jesus Christ entered to the most holy place, the seventh angel begins to sound. But repeatedly, we declare that that is only the groundwork. It says, in 1844, also was the very time of the days of the voice of the seventh angel, when he shall begin to sound, and when the mystery of God should be finished, as yet declared to his servants, the prophets. Now, let us go back again to the divine principle concerning the sounding of the sixth trumpet. The sounding of the sixth trumpet must be pointing to the time when Jesus Christ is in the holy place, because the voice cometh from the golden altar. Tract number 5, page 78. And that voice is the voice of Jesus Christ. Obviously, therefore, the sounding of the sixth trumpet indicating that Jesus Christ, his mediatorial work is in the holy place, which is typifying the Feast of Trumpets, 10 days, in Leviticus 23, 24 to 26, by which that is prophetic. Numbers 14:34, Ezekiel 4:6, 1 day equivalent to 1 year, 10 days, 10 years. By which in White House Recruiter, page 19, pointing to the proclamation of the message of William Miller from 1833 to 1844. That is the sounding of the sixth trumpet in the period of the temple, the first 5 seals. But in the particular object in view, that is during the time when Jesus Christ is in the holy place for the proceedings of the last 2 seals, the altar and the worshippers. No wonder why in 2TG number 12 on page 30, saying, whereas the last 2 seals which contain the things that pertain to the judgment of the living, to the people who must know that their cases are on trial, are quiet now. So the first sounding of the sixth trumpet, the voice cometh from the golden altar, that is during the proceedings of the temple. Those who died from Adam up to 1844, first 5 seals. But the second sounding of the sixth trumpet is in the time when Jesus Christ is in the holy place for the proceedings of the altar and the worshippers. By which after their proceedings will be finished, then Jesus Christ will return to the most holy place, and that is called the second coming of Jesus Christ into the most holy place. How do we know that that would be on March 27, 2021? So that is the most important question. Why is it that we are very certain that that is the last and the final day of atonement on March 27, 2021? Now, I would like to read first tract number 3 on page 20. It says, tract number 3, page 20. For Christ is not entered into the holy places made with hands, which are the figures of the true, but into heaven itself, now to appear in the presence of God for us. Hebrews 9 verse 24. Indeed now once in the end of the world hath he appeared to put away sin by the sacrifice of himself. And as it is appointed unto men once to die, but after this the judgment, the cleansing of the sanctuary, Daniel 8 verse 14. Then it says, plainly therefore, the judgment is to begin, and the sanctuary to be cleansed, not before, but after the fulfillment of the period of those appointed to die. It says, for those appointed to die. The judging being consistent with the records found in the books of heaven, the names therefore of those who are found unworthy without the wedding garment are blotted from the books. Thus is the sanctuary cleansed. So when does the sanctuary, or the perfect fulfillment that the sanctuary is to be cleansed? After the proceedings for those appointed to die. What does it mean by appointed to die? They are judged while living. Judged while living. Now, I would like to read to you 2SR 162. 2SR page 162. It says, the cases of all who are sealed from 1929 to the final close of provision will be investigated before the throne in the heavenly sanctuary while living. To repeat again, it cannot be construed that all of them from 1929 are still living, for many of them were already dead. But it can be easily understood that the cases of all, who are they? Who are they that sealed from 1929? Revelation 14:13. Because the altar, the sixth seal, is divided only to 2 classes. Isaiah 57:1 and Revelation 14:13. So, Isaiah 57:1, that is from 1844 to 1930 or 1929. The period of time before the rod came. But from 1929 onwards, that is already Revelation 14:13. Now, let us read again to SR 162. The cases of all who are sealed from 1929 to the final close of provision. So, it is pointing to the final close of provision under the judgment that pertains to the dead. Or in other words, all of them who died after that cleansing of the books in the heavenly sanctuary, by which whose names are not recorded in the Lamb's book of life, then they must be the wicked. And that is final close of provision to the dead. Now let us read again the statement. It says, the cases of all who are sealed from 1929 to the final close of provision will be investigated before the throne in the heavenly sanctuary while living. So that is appointed to die. The investigation commences after the fulfillment of Ezekiel 9. So what investigation that commences after the fulfillment of Ezekiel 9? All of them that had been, or the entire constituent of Revelation 14:13, by which such investigation is after the fulfillment of Ezekiel 9, and while some of them were still living, appointed to die. So it's very important to understand the fulfillment of Ezekiel 9 because it says the investigation commences after the fulfillment of Ezekiel 9. What investigation? The investigation of those who are appointed to die. And they were investigated in the heavenly sanctuary while living. And such investigation commences after the fulfillment of Ezekiel 9. Those who are sealed from 1929 to the fulfillment of Ezekiel 9, close of provision for the church, are living saints, 144,000 in number, who shall never die, translated without tasting death. So, ponder deeply, brothers and sisters. It says, those who are sealed from 1929 to the fulfillment of Ezekiel 9. To the fulfillment of Ezekiel 9. Not after the fulfillment. And those who are sealed, brothers and sisters, that is the 144,000 living saints. And it says that the fulfillment of Ezekiel 9, close of provision for the church. 2SR page 162. Now let us connect 2SR 216. It says, I would like to read only the portion saying, the purification of the church, the separation of the tares from the wheat, the fulfillment of Ezekiel 9. Now, let us ponder deeply. What is the fulfillment of Ezekiel 9? The separation of the tares from among the wheat. Let us put here. Fulfillment of Ezekiel 9. What is the fulfillment of Ezekiel 9? The separation of the tares from among the wheat. Among the wheat. And during this period of time, it says they are sealed. That is the statement. They are sealed. I would like to connect to you another statement. Tract number 5. Tract number 5, page 74. It will be noted that the 144,000 are called the first fruits, denoting that they are sealed at the beginning of the harvest, the commencement of the time to separate the tares from the wheat. When does the 144,000 are sealed? It did not say denoting that they were sealed, but rather inscribed in present tense. They are sealed at the beginning of the harvest. And when does that harvest begins? That is the commencement of the time to separate the tares from the wheat. So they are sealed during that period of time by which the tares are separated from among the wheat. Now, if you will be saying that occurrence, the tares are separated from among the wheat, that is the slaughtering, are we saying that it is during the slaughtering that the 144,000 are being sealed? How illogical then, brothers and sisters. So, that statement cannot be applied as a slaughtering. And secondly, the fulfillment of Ezekiel 9 mentioned in 2SR occurred in the heavenly sanctuary. They are judged, brothers and sisters, after the fulfillment of Ezekiel 9. Now, let us ponder deeply, brothers and sisters, this wonderful prophecy. The fulfillment of Ezekiel 9 is a very broad subject, and we need to study closely concerning the fulfillment of Ezekiel 9. Now, the statement saying that the 144,000 are sealed when? At the beginning of the harvest. When does the beginning of the harvest? At the commencement of the separation of the tares from the wheat. That is pointing to the heavenly sanctuary. The sealing that occurs in the heavenly sanctuary. And it is pointing to the ingathering of the names of the living saints into that Lamb's Book of Life, sealed with 7 seals. Now, to repeat again, brothers and sisters, how do we know that it is on March 27, 2021, which is the last and the final day of atonement, by which at that time, all the names that will be left written in the Lamb's Book of Life are only 144,000 living saints in the congregation among the living under the 7th seal. Now, I would like to connect to you first concerning the diagram given by B.T. Hotep on the 12 figurative months. So, to repeat again, you can see here 5, that is September 16, and it says fulfillment of Ezekiel 9. Therefore, September 17, that is already the commencement of the period after the fulfillment of Ezekiel 9. Because we are trying to locate that period of time by which those who are appointed to die, brothers and sisters, those who are appointed to die, they were being investigated in the heavenly sanctuary while living, and such investigation is after the fulfillment of Ezekiel 9. It says to SR 162, the cases of all who are sealed from 1929 to the final close of fruition will be investigated before the throne in the heavenly sanctuary while living. So, the constituent of Revelation 14 verse 13, beginning from 1929, all of them will be investigated in the heavenly sanctuary, while some of the constituent of Revelation 14:13 were still living and appointed to die. The investigation commences after the fulfillment of Ezekiel 9. So, the investigation commences after the fulfillment of Ezekiel 9. So, here, the fulfillment of Ezekiel 9 is the expiration of the 5 symbolical months. Therefore, it can be easily understood that the investigation of the saints, those who are appointed to die, while living, must be after the expiration of the 5 symbolical months. But what investigation? Is it the investigation in the holy place? Or is it the investigation in the most holy place? So, it is very important to understand what investigation by which they will be judged. I would like to read tract number 3, 1934 edition. On page 75, it says, now to prove that Sister White's writings are in perfect harmony with the testimonies of the prophets. Page 76, 1934, tract 3. Supplement. It's for prophecy in perfect harmony. It's for prophecy in perfect harmony. Now to prove that Sister White's writings are in perfect harmony with the testimonies of the prophets, we quote from the Great Controversy, page 425, showing that the purification of the church took place while the investigative judgment of the dead was going on, and just before the commencement of the loud cry of the third angel's message, the harvest. While the investigative judgment is going forward in heaven, while the sins of penitent believers are being removed from the sanctuary, there is to be a special work of purification, of putting away of sin among God's people upon earth. Then the church, which our Lord at His coming is to receive to Himself, will be a glorious church. It says, not having spot or wrinkle or any such thing. Then she will look forth as the morning, fair as the moon, clear as the sun, and terrible as an army with banners. She is to go forth into all the world, conquering and to conquer. Prophets and Kings, page 725. So here the voice of inspiration says that during the purification of the church, the investigative judgment of the dead was going on in the heavenly sanctuary. We explained several times that the preposition of indicating that such proceedings is in the most holy place. The preposition for indicates that the proceedings is in the holy place. Judgment for the dead, that is in the holy place. Judgment of the dead, that is in the most holy place. But we need to distinguish and separate the judgment that pertains to the living, because there is a wide contrast between the two. Because the judgment that pertains to the living, not only the heavenly sanctuary are thus affected, but as well as the earthly sanctuary, according to the shepherd's rod. So, we can easily understand that the statement in 2SR 162, that the judgment mentioned there after the fulfillment of Ezekiel 9, is the judgment in the most holy place, because it says judgment of the dead. So, since they were already investigated in the most holy place, then the proceedings or the entire proceedings that pertains to the dead is completely finished before the expiration of the 5 symbolical months. Because after the expiration of the 5 symbolical months, the proceedings is already in the most holy place, pertains to the dead, not pertaining to the living. And it says that is after the fulfillment of Ezekiel 9. And here's another, although we will continue that subject on our next episode. Here in tract number 5, on page 74, saying, in tract number 3, the harvest, the time from the baptism of Christ to the close of provision, is shown to be illustrated by 12 figurative months, 6 from Christ's baptism to his crucifixion, 5 from the crucifixion to the ingathering of the first fruits, the 144,000. Revelation 14 verse 4. Leaving 1 month for the ingathering of the second fruits, the great multitude. Revelation 7 verse 9. Now, I would like to demonstrate that statement. That statement can be easily understood, brothers and sisters, in harmony with all other related statements concerning the great multitude. Now, I would like to make a division line. So this is the commencement of ingathering of the great multitude. The great multitude. Revelation 7 verse 9. According to the shepherd's rod, when? In tract number 5, 110. After the cleansing of the heavenly temple. After the cleansing of the heavenly temple. Heavenly temple. Second, after the judgment of the dead. And what is number 3? After the separation of the bad from among the good. Of the bad from among the good. So there are 3 after mentioned there. The ingathering of the great multitude. Revelation 7 verse 9. After the cleansing of the heavenly temple, that is found in tract number 5, 110 and 111. After the cleansing of the heavenly temple, after the judgment of the dead, and after the separation of the bad from among the good. Now that ingathering is pointing to the heavenly sanctuary. Meaning, for example, this is the book. I would like to divide by 2. First fruit and second fruit. It is the book of the living. So after all the names of the wicked had been blotted out in the congregation among the living, then immediately the names of the righteous, the second fruits, great multitude, will be inscribed into this book. So the term ingathering in the heavenly sanctuary is the inscription of their names. The names of the constituent of the great multitude will be inscribed into the Lamb's book of life after the cleansing of the book among the congregation of the living, because that is living saints. Their names will be inscribed into the book of the living as the second fruits. So the page pertaining to the first fruit, the names of the wicked must be blotted out, and after the names of the wicked have been blotted out, then the inscription of the names of the great multitude will be inscribed into this book, immediately after the book had been cleansed. But it must be after the judgment of the dead, because it says after the judgment of the dead. But what judgment of the dead? Pointing first to the blotting out of sins. After the sins of the righteous, the last constituent of the altar, all their sins had been blotted out, then the names of the righteous, of the great multitude, Revelation 7:9, will be inscribed into this book. This third one, it seems that there is a similarity, but the mere fact that it is, there are 3 enumerations, this one must be different. And it is pointing to the earth. It is pointing to the triumphant church, that after all the unsaved ones had been taken out from among God's people, then the names of the constituent of the great multitude will be inscribed into this book. So there are 3 events to be finished before the inscription of the names of the righteous under the great multitude will be inscribed into the Lamb's Book of Life, sealed with 7 seals. There are 3 events. After the cleansing of the heavenly temple, that is after the blotting out of names. After the judgment of the dead, that is after the blotting out of sins of the last constituent of the altar, those who are judged while living, and after the church is purified. The church by which the 144,000 will be brought into the church, the triumphant church. So, we will continue that subject on our next episode, and hoping that God would help us always, brothers and sisters, to understand the prophecy before everything is too late. I am focusing all my attention to that very important event, March 27, 2021, the final day of atonement. And blessed are those whose names will be retained in the Lamb's Book of Life. And that is why it is closely connected. Daniel 12 and Daniel 11:45. What is Daniel 11:45? Pointing to the presidential election of the United States of America. Pointing to the last and the final presidential election in the United States of America. That horn power by which it is at work against God, against His people, and against His truth during that 42 months prophecy. That horn power is already at work against God, against His truth, and against His people. So, thank you very much for listening and viewing this program, and we will continue this subject on our next episode, hoping that God would give me more physical strength, or the next time I could be able to render this subject in good physical condition. Thank you very much. May the good Lord bless you and have a wonderful evening.